Welcome to Econ 102, where economist Noah Smith and I make sense of what's happening in the news, technology, business, and beyond through the lens of economics. Let's jump right in. Can you summarize the key differences or evolutions on America's approach to China, kind of like an overview or wrap it in a bow between Obama, Trump, and then Biden? And I know in some ways they're a continuation.
So Obama basically was thinking like in the old model. He was thinking we need to engage with China so they'll open up their markets and they will become a more democratic, open, liberal, peaceful country, blah, blah, blah. It didn't work. It actually worked a little bit in like the 90s and 2000s. That was like, it did work some, but it just didn't work enough. The idea was, America's just got to innovate faster. We got to your innovations just get stolen in a week. That doesn't help. You're just operating as free research for Chinese companies at that point. Innovate faster. No. So that was stupid. But Obama was not one to break with tradition on a lot of things. Like even on fiscal stuff, like he was a very traditionalist guy in terms of ideas. He was conservative, small c conservative in a number of ways. Trump broke the mold in terms of ideas, right? He did some export controls, not as much as Biden, but some. He did tariffs. He did, again, not as much as Biden, but some. He did, he yelled free trade is bad and China's bad. We've got to fight them. We've got to win. This was a huge paradigm shift. So Trump changed ideas, but his policy changes were not very effective. We saw there was a little bit of an increase in our trade deficit with China, but not really a decrease in our trade deficit overall. We saw China just reroute stuff through like Vietnam to the small extent that we stopped importing Chinese stuff. Not very effective. The tariffs had like a little bit of an effect. But then, and then the export controls were like small potatoes. Then we ramped them up later. But Trump broke the mold. Trump and his victory in 2016 made everyone realize that you weren't going to win by saying free trade, engagement. You'd win by bashing China. And that made it bipartisan. And bipartisan things endure in America. Bipartisan things endure and unipartisan things die, basically. That's how America works. And so China became a bipartisan thing, but Trump is the one who was the catalyst. He was the meteor who crashed into this rickety, tottering old intellectual structure of engagement, in free trade and basically knocked it right over like a wrecking ball. And then Biden comes in and starts trying to build something from that wreckage. Let's build a different thing. And industrial policy and higher export controls and higher tariffs and things like that are all attempts to build a different thing out of the old, to replace the old thing that Trump smashed. Trump was destructive, Biden is constructive. And I think those are both important. I give Trump credit for this. I think this was a good and needed thing that Trump did, but he wasn't necessarily capable as a person of going farther. And in his second term, there's a good chance he might backtrack on it simply because China might pay him to reverse the earlier things he did.
It's really interesting. It's like, it's almost like, sometimes in a business, there's a founder who gets a business to like seed or series A, but then can't get it any further. And then a more professional seasoned CEO comes in and, takes everything the founder was trying to do and actually makes it great. It seems like that's kind of how you're describing Trump and Biden in some ways. And it's almost like maybe in the future, they'll be seen as like a necessary tag team of presidents.
And we've seen this several times before, actually. We've seen this with, Eisenhower couldn't have built the interstate and Nixon couldn't have created the, environmental and, laws without the New Deal. And, could Reagan have deregulated without Carter being a deregulator? Maybe, but Carter did much of the work. And Clinton definitely couldn't have like ended welfare, the old welfare system and made a new welfare system in its place without Reagan, right? And so we see, in fact, the New Deal may have not even happened without Hoover sort of going in a slightly more pro-government direction on his own before Roosevelt. And so we've seen bipartisan stuff endures. When you have tag teams of alternating presidents trying to one up the other party with similar things in the same direction, the policy endures. The New Deal built a bunch of stuff and that endured, while simultaneously creating social insurance, that endured. And then, Reaganomics, cut taxes, rationalize welfare, blah, 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 that endured. And so I think that strategic policy with regards to China will endure. And Trump was the one to get that started. That was important. That was necessary. But I think he was not able to move it past just the destructive stage. And now if we elect him, he will probably roll it back because someone will just slip him some cash.
It's interesting because the thing that people were excited about Trump at the beginning was that he's not he doesn't have to be bought because he's so rich. But now that he's maybe bankrupt.
Right. They were thinking in terms of a discounted dividend model instead of a free cash flow model. Anyway, no, they weren't thinking of cash flow. Trump is illiquid. Trump probably has his fame gives him assets that make him rich. Trump is rich, but Trump is highly illiquid. He needs cash. His assets are very illiquid. It's either real estate stuff that people don't necessarily want to buy right now, or it's in, internet properties like Trump Media, right? That there's a big lockup on it. So he needs cash to pay his bills. And so it's liquidity that he needs.
Didn't the Truth Social SPAC get him some cash or no? It's like a backdoor fundraising mechanism or something.
Yeah, I think not. I think, yes, it did to some degree. And I think Yass helped with that, didn't he? Didn't Jeff Yass help with the SPAC?
Yeah, I heard that.
I think it did get him some cash, and that was why Trump flipped on TikTok. But China has this long history of buying its critics. So I remember this in the book Wireless Wars by Jonathan Pelson. There was this vivid anecdote of this British guy who was like the main critic of having Huawei in UK networks. And then Huawei hired him, and he became the biggest advocate of Huawei and because he had been this critic before, he had all the street cred, right? And so he could go and say, well, I was a critic, but now these things are fine. And so, people didn't just say, oh, hypocrite who just got bought, but he was, he got bought. Trump has the credibility of the base. He can claim to be anti-China, and at least his base and some other people too will believe him simply because he was yelled a lot about China in his first term. He can cancel export controls. He can make a bunch of loopholes for tariffs. He can cancel industrial policy that would give us a chance of competing with China, and he could abandon Taiwan. And people will still say Trump is anti-China. People will still say Trump is hawkish on China because he has that reputation. And if you think this can't happen, look at Nixon. Only Nixon could go to China.
Only Nixon can go to China.
Econ 102 is a podcast from Turpentine, the network behind Moment of Zen, In the Arena, The Cognitive Revolution, and more. If you like what you hear, subscribe and leave us a review in the App Store. You can keep up with both of our Substacks for written analysis of the topics we cover in the show at noahopinion.substack.com and erictornberg.substack.com. Thanks for listening.
You like to optimize things. You've chosen the perfect credit card to maximize your travel points, and you always find the fastest route when you drive. Shouldn't you handle your charitable giving the same way? GiveWell spends 50,000 hours every year doing deep dives into different charitable programs to try to find the ways to do the most good for your dollar. GiveWell has now spent over 17 years researching charitable organizations and only directs funding to a few of the highest impact opportunities they've found. Over 100,000 donors have used GiveWell to donate more than $2 billion. Rigorous evidence suggests that these donations will save over 200,000 lives and improve the lives of millions more. It's easy to see why the Boston Globe called GiveWell the gold standard for giving. GiveWell wants as many donors as possible to make informed decisions about high-impact giving. You can find all of their research and recommendations on their site for free. You can make tax-deductible donations to their recommended funds or charities, and GiveWell doesn't take a cut. Go to givewell.org to find out more or make a donation. Select podcast and enter Econ 102 at checkout to make sure they know you heard about them from us. Again, that's givewell.org to donate or find out more.